All right.
Hello and good morning, everybody. Welcome to episode 9
of
Raised Red, Living Blue. I'm Sloan Roden, joined by
Jason Will.
Okay, let's do a quick recap over the last week. Last time we spoke, I was getting my head right to go to my stepdad's funeral. And everyone was lovely and welcoming, and I'm very, very glad I went. You know, there's still some other things to work through, and I think there's always a little bit of survivor's guilt in there. Like, man, looking back now, I wish I had gotten a chance to see him before he passed, because my mom went and visited him and I wasn't asked. Should I have pushed? I don't know. I take comfort that he is no longer in pain. He's no longer sick. And my oldest stepsister, Dawnalise, whenever I expressed how special he was to me and that mom expressed to her, she just was like, I know. I know Sloan loved him. And so that makes me feel
That is nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't have to sacrifice your relationships because, you know, not everybody is as accepting as they should be.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Not the judgments of other people shouldn't keep you from, having any sort of quality of life, in my opinion.
Thank you, friend. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah. So.
Well, Monday was inauguration day. So,
yeah.
Okay, tell me how, kind of what you did on inauguration day, and then where your head and emotions have been in the days following.
So I feel like I'm going to be very critical this morning.
Okay.
I feel like there's a lot to be critical about.
I feel like that has been me the past few weeks, so I will pass that baton.
And, just when I was thinking about what I was grateful for this morning, I was grateful for this show. I had somebody ask me recently, what's our motive for doing this? What's the play? I don't get it. What are y'all trying to do? And, I think my response was, well, there is no play. It's just cathartic. It's like therapy, because, here's where I'm going with this.
Okay.
All right. So throughout the day, every day, I'm wanting to text or Facebook message. I'm wanting to scuffle with the MAGAs. I've got, I'm from South Alabama. So I don't know if I get it way more than you, but in my news feed, it's just all we're back, baby. America's back. It's the golden age. And some stupid son of a bitch put on Facebook the other day that, and this is a respected business person in Alabama. He was a restaurant owner, very successful guy. And I think he's pretty much retired now, but he's only took one day for Trump to solve global warming because we had this big polar vortex. So I'm grateful for this show because it gives me an outlet, so I don't have to feel like I have to engage with these people.
Right.
Although we may have, 5 listeners across the globe, I appreciate those 5 listeners because they help me, maintain my sanity, but also, not get into these, Facebook wars.
Which are not constructive.
They're not productive at all.
Nobody's opinion on either side. And let's even say it's a debate within a side. Nothing is ever solved on a keyboard.
Right.
The most constructive conversations we have are face to face and belly to belly. And just
get
off the keyboard words, because I am guilty of it, and I have to let that go.
So, we're not going to change anybody's mind, but it keeps me from starting wars inside my household, outside my household.
Yes.
So grateful for the show. I think we're just going to have to wait for some people to self-discover what's going on. I have seen a headline that I like, that blue collar workers are giving Trump a very short rope. Their patience for change is very thin, and they need to see immediate results.
Yeah.
And they're not going to see them.
Yeah. Kind of 2 points. Point A for, the quote unquote play, which seems kind of devious, and I don't think we have one. Yes, very cathartic, gives us an outlet. The, people that I have spoke with who listen are thankful to hear like-minded people, and it helps them not feel so alone, which is kind of what we felt like. Okay, I don't just have to have these feelings alone. I can come together with somebody and start to build a little bit of a community. And for me, it is making me go a step further from reading a headline or just one article and looking more into it and becoming more informed and educated, because I clocked out after Biden won. And so I was part of the problem. And so that's interesting. This point. Doing this together helps me hit on other areas, for my involvement, my engagement, my advocacy.
What are we on? What day is this of his presidency? It was sworn in on
the beginning of day 3.
Okay, so
if you count Tuesday as day 1, yeah, we're at the beginning of day 3.
So, I have pledged to find something positive to say about the right. I'm really struggling with it. But the first thing I want to say,
yes,
the Ukraine war has not been solved. In day 1, 24 hours is all he needed to end the war in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the other day 1 promises? Oh, day 1, I'm going to do this. This is all going to be solved. Just like
right. I guess
waving a magic wand.
Yeah. I took Monday completely off of news.
God, that was a smart move.
Off of social media. Did I text you this? I might have texted somebody else. I thought, how can I make Inauguration Day gay and so I watched all day was RuPaul's Drag Race, and I wanted something like very campy and over the top and lighthearted, and there's a local drag queen who is on this current season, and so I'm a late adopter, and because I got so into the first few episodes and then I had to wait a week, I'm now going back to old seasons so I can tap into that and binge to my heart's delight. And the episode I was watching, it was in 2018, and these messages of hope, and gay people we've always been here, and we will fight for our rights, and we will stand up for each other. And it still kind of had this like, fuck Trump, he's not going to put us back in the closet.
Yeah.
And then people share their coming out stories and their struggles with their families, and some have very supportive parents, and some, one contestant was talking about how he was taken immediately to church and an exorcism was performed on him and was about to go to gay conversion therapy, and he packed up his car and he moved out and he's not been home. So it is completely over the top, but there are these so real stories and important things. And so I was just, it's fun, but I found myself crying throughout it. And it ended up kind of being the best thing for me to watch that day. And it kind of started as a joke.
Yeah.
So with that, I have not paid attention to the executive orders, which I would think are people saying, well, these are all the things he's going to do day 1. And I've not been able to like get my mind right to start going down that rabbit trail.
Yeah, it's a lot to digest. The main thing, I did not watch the inauguration. I tried. I really just couldn't get through it. But what turned me off immediately was the divisive tone of it. It wasn't like clean slate, move forward. It was like, I'm here to solve the disaster, the mess that was created behind me. But it was like, very derogatory terms to suggest that the past administration was criminal in nature, and that he was going to be the saving grace, and he's the savior of all things that are bad and wrong with our country and the world. And it's just the divisive tone of this. I have been on the soapbox about January 6th and the election denialism. I think that continues to draw a wedge. And here we go with all these pardons. But I was curious, did you happen to see that there was a heated exchange on Morning Joe about the January 6th pardons?
I didn't.
So this is a very good point that Mika was making. I want to get your take on it.
Okay.
So Trump was basically, in their opinion, created a publicity stunt he was on the stage with some of the families of the Israeli hostage families and was talking about the January 6th hostages. So I'm going to read this and then I want to get your immediate response. So Mika called out the president, calling the rioters hostages as he stood with the families of Israeli hostages, while co-host Joe Scarborough said Democrats were quietly reminding themselves of the president's narrow margin of victory in 2024's popular vote. So it was just very classless, tasteless, gross to a lot of people that he would compare January 6th defendants, criminals, whatever you want to call them, to the Israeli hostages.
Okay. Who are they saying are the Jan 6 hostages? The ones that have been imprisoned and have been indicted?
Yeah, there's like 1,600 of them, and he pardoned 1,500.
Okay, and so Trump compared these January 6 insurrectionists that have been imprisoned, they are hostages like the Israeli hostages?
He was using the term, referring to them as hostages, while at a press event with some of the families of the Israeli hostages. And they were just like, how gross is that? Now so the only positive thing I can pull from the Republican side is that there have been some senators and Congress people that have rebuked him for this pardon. But the ones I think with the loudest, the biggest microphones, like Senator Marco Rubio and the Senate Majority Leader Thune, very disappointed in their responses to this.
Yeah.
One of which being on the Today Show. I mean, Marco Rubio almost ended the interview because he was being asked controversial questions, which brings me back to another Facebook post that I said, I mean, like, now I'm starting to get why people are like off of Facebook, because I've been unfollowing and unfriending. It's just not enough. But somebody put that, this is why Trump won, is that Republicans can't get on TV without being accosted with facts or really tough questions. It should all be like softball type stuff. But it's like Marco Rubio came on the Today Show to talk about foreign policy, and Craig Melvin immediately confronted him with a domestic policy of pardoning these Jan 6 rioters. And his response was, I'm in charge of foreign policy. I'm not here to talk about domestic matters. If you keep bringing it up, I'm going to end the interview. I
can see Marco Rubio's point. And then, and we don't know the conversations around, please come to this interview. These are the things we're going to talk about. Do they get that? Do they not? And then it's like, okay, well, January 6th pardons is like, really controversial. So like, let's see what we can get out of it. But like, would Buttigieg have ever walked off an interview? Like, I get, hey, this is not what I'm here for, and sticking to this point, but then the like walking off feels very childish. So I think there's a way to like set boundaries and answer questions and try to go back to the point at hand rather than making it sensationalized.
To me, this is very dangerous. It's like a state TV thing, state-run TV where it's very propaganda-driven. I mean, if it's all softball questions, the problem is that, this January 6th and the election denialism and all that stuff has been delegitimized by the right so much that, the leaders of the right, that the followers of the right are like, come on, let's move on already. And that's kind of the tone of these political leaders. Like, why are we living in the past of January 6th? Because we've never really dealt with it in the present.
Well, and they love to not deal with anything in the... It just feels like all of this goes down to nobody wants to be held accountable.
And the point
Okay.
of Craig Melvin asking him a domestic question.
Oh, okay, yes.
When he is now, in charge of our foreign policy, is that post January 6th, immediately post January 6th, Marco Rubio made inferences about how this affected us on a global stage.
Okay. I see the tie. I now see the tie.
But they make that tie. So like after, Craig dropped it, the interview continued. And then right after that, they go to Kristen Welker. And Kristen was like, well, this is why Craig was asking the question, is that he was very adamant about how this made a definite impact, a stain on America on the global stage. So, and I don't envy these people. Like, I know it's got to be super hard to eat crow all the time, when you're on these interviews. But at the same time, I mean, doesn't anybody see the danger in sweeping this stuff under the rug and not talking about it? All right, so here's some CNN headlines. It's just like, of all the shit that's going on. Congress passes immigrant detention bill and first legislative win for Trump. Trump targets DEI and civil service protection, striking fear in some federal workers.
Yeah.
Flights canceled for refugees who were slated to travel to U.S. Refugee sounds like maybe they're in peril and they need to come here for safety or something to escape some persecution.
And that's one thing, like, is refugee and asylum seekers, are those different? Are they same? Are they under the same umbrella but different? And those are a lot. I mean, I'm not versed in really anything immigration, but yeah, refugee makes it sound like they are fleeing a very bad situation. But also, I could argue that anybody who was willing to travel on foot through the Darien Gap is fleeing a tragic situation.
Yeah.
Oh God, just the lack of empathy is. It's hard.
So here's the last one, though,
for me to stomach.
And this one is why I just turned off the inauguration. Trump made more than 20 false claims in his inauguration day remarks. So I don't like the word you're using, accountability. I don't understand why that's bad. If Biden makes 20 false claims, there's going to be hell to pay.
Right.
And as there should be.
Right.
So I just... this is a really dangerous time. The other thing I'm just shocked by is that people are so shocked. When I get in, I want to talk a lot more. The things I wanted to talk about today mostly, or the thing, was the January 6th pardon.
Yeah.
And express my disappointment over the way that's being handled by political leadership. I'll just say this just to be fair on both sides.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. It's like, well, of course, the guy who incited an insurrection is going to, put these people up on a pedestal and say they're heroes and pardon them. We were talking in our pardons episode, talking about how some pardons, like pardoning Nixon, was a chance for the country to move forward. And there was some very great constructive TikTok comments on that one. I really appreciate it. And one person was like, yeah, but an argument was it was a sweep under the rug and we didn't deal with it. And he wasn't held accountable. And then it almost opened the door to sweep more under. And there's an argument of like creating a precedent that we now don't have to deal with these things. We don't want to deal with Jim Crow era and talking about anything with the civil rights movement and what led us there, and dealing with critical race theory, because if we talk about how this country's laws was founded on systemic racism to hold people down and keep them in boxes, then we have to confront our wrongdoings. And with a country who doesn't want to face the music, it's just going to continue, and we have set that precedent, and I hate it, and it seems the right is just going to keep moving the same way. Sweep it on the rug, and just use that same argument of we can't move forward if we continue to look backwards, we can't move forward if we continue to look backwards. And I hate this quote because I feel like it's been weaponized against me, but I'm going to use it here, is, well, hurt people hurt people. So if you are a hurt person, you will continue to lash out and hurt others if you do not take the time to work on and work through and heal yourself. That's what we will be doing as a country. And it's shown. And it's just like the saying of history repeats itself. And if you burn all the books, the citizens have no way to know that history is about to repeat itself.
Yeah, well, and a word you use a lot on this podcast is control. And I feel like maybe one way we can reach people is, just to point out that they're being manipulated, I feel like, in a lot of ways. To think that, trying to steal an election is not a big deal. To elect the first felon president in history, not a big deal. And they're proud of it. I'm voting for the felon. The signs are in the yards. So the precedents, I think that's a great word, that are being set are very scary.
Yes.
What we're willing to allow and overlook and, push under the rug, it's really, really scary. But here's the thing, is that here's something positive I can say about Trump.
Okay. Hit me with it.
I've said it before. I'll say it again. But, he does not try to disguise himself. He will pander to different audiences depending on who he's in front of. Like, if he's in front of anti-abortion people, he's very anti. If he's with pro-choice people, like, oh, let's just give it to the states. Let them, that's choice. But really, he's doing all the things he said it would do, and people are shocked. The big thing about January 6th is that people were shocked. Republican leaders were shocked that he would do these sweeping pardons. And I was like, what? And you heard that a lot on the campaign trail. He's really not going to do that. It's just his bluster.
Mm-hmm.
But he is who he is. He's the guy who said, I can go out on Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody dead and still be elected. This is the same guy. He's never tried to pretend to be something that he's not. Unless, you're a billionaire. Or a big billionaire. He's more like a millionaire. I think he pretends to be a billionaire. I'm not sure.
I don't know. I would argue, if you're pandering to different groups of people, then you're always choosing to be somebody you're not. And it's shown that he's a grifter. So he has made his career with smoke and mirrors.
Oh, for sure. In terms of what he's going to do on day one with these executive orders, the way the mandate of his presidency, it was all front and center. I think the only thing, maybe we'll have to see is Project 2025. He blatantly said, I have nothing to do with that. I barely know what it is.
Right.
All that seems to be bullshit.
Yeah.
A lot of these things he said he was going to do them, and he's doing them. Right.
I saw something on Instagram this morning from A Girl Has No President, and somebody posted, and there's this guy saying he and his wife were scheduled to move from somewhere in Texas to another city in Texas, and they've sold their house and they've spent money. She's a nurse, got hired at a VA hospital, and now with one of the executive orders, there's a hiring freeze, so she has no job.
That sucks.
And so the comments are very F around and find out, and it's like, oh, we're in the unintended consequences. And I dislike the term unintended consequences because I feel it is used to weaponize. It's I've had it weaponized against me, and I see it weaponized against other people. But going back, a little bit ago with you saying, I think they're going to give him a very short leash. I really hope people who voted for him, and these things are happening, and these hiring freezes that affect them, and their, Medicare rates are rising, and gas is rising, and eggs are not coming down. I really hope they put the pieces together. And just like they were so fast to jump off of the party of the Democrats and jump to the Republicans, I hope I mean, I don't really love like people to flip flop, but I hope people see like this is not what we voted for. And Trump is in the business to help his oligarch friends.
Is it fair to, I think, make a connection between, I know this may be a big leap, between like slavery and the wealth inequality in America? I mean, it just seems like, and the whole deal with slavery was it was profitable. I mean, it was profitable really on a global scale. There was other countries that were benefiting from this.
I think one of your metaphors or like commonalities with slavery, I don't know if it's necessarily this, but it is the funnel of the incarcerated and all of these government contracts that companies have where they hire prison labor and are able to pay them way, way, way below minimum wage. And one thing I did read is, was it the 13th Amendment that got rid of slavery? And it was like, no, there's still slavery in America. Like if you are in prison, like you are still considered a slave in the United States of America. So that's really the only thing that I would, but like the snuffing of the middle class, like I would go back to the French Revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution, any of these where, you know, there was these like monarchies and estates and just wealth. That those are the ties in history. I think there's not yet, we don't have one, but we're going to repeat what happened in other countries if this continues. And just the wealth and the greed. No one person needs this much fucking money, because the only thing then you can do is buy off everybody to continue to only help yourself. And I think that's the danger of somebody like Elon Musk.
Yeah, very. Like he's been in the feed. There was something where he did this gesture
that they're calling, but please don't do it. They're calling the Roman salute, and it's really a Nazi salute.
Well, and then somebody was saying that it was all taken out of context, that he was really saying like something about I love you,
he was grabbing his heart and throwing. There are so many ways you can do that. The angle of his hand, the forceful of it, like how straight and erect his arm was, the facial expression. He like, when people show you who they are, believe them. I believe it's a Nazi salute.
Yeah. And it's just like, hey, they're MAGA, we're the woke mob. So the woke mob is just going to denigrate Elon Musk. The woke mob is going to make sure that Pete Hegseth doesn't get confirmed. Woke. And people just start looking. They're just not peeling back the layers. But on that note, let's take a break.
Okay.
All right. Whew.
Welcome back, everybody.
I'm exhausted.
Yeah, it's been a really long, hard few days already, man. You know, in thinking about this episode, but also thinking like, what do I do over the next 4 years? How do we channel our thoughts and emotions into either good or advocacy? You know, in anything, it's like, yeah, you can throw spaghetti at the wall, but the most impact you can have is when it's concentrated on specific efforts. And so I'm trying to think, okay, where can I pinpoint my time and energy? But this made me feel really good. This is a quote from this week's Pod Save America. Dan Pfeiffer says, "We don't have to follow Trump down every rabbit hole. Our attention is our greatest resource, and we can decide when we give it to Trump." And so I think that's so good, or like for everybody to take on. And I sent that to a couple people that it's like, oh my gosh, how are we going to get through this and all of the things and our mental health. And I think that's the best way to do it. And so I'm trying to take that advice, but find okay, where are my efforts that are the most important to me? So maybe I'm not going shallow on a whole lot of things, but I can really be educated and learn, go deeper on a few. And so the trans athletes in sports has been pulling at my heartstrings for a while. And I realized that I've come on here and I've like read some headlines and there's a lot I don't know. And I've been using the opinion of others to form my own. And so trying to do my own research. So I found this podcast.
What's it called?
The Anti-Trans Hate Machine.
Damn.
It is currently on the season 3, but I went back to season 1, episode 1. It aired June of 2021. And the name of the episode is It's Not Really About Sports. Which was so eye-catching because that's what I've heard this whole time is it's not about sports, that they're using sports as a way in. And so the narrator is a Black trans woman, is a journalist and the founder of Trans Media. And this episode dives into a House bill from Idaho, from the Idaho State House. It came out in March 2020 called the Fairness in Women's Sports Act. And we see these names not only in these like trans bills, but like we see them in our state and we see them in the U.S. House and Senate. And like they have these names around the bills that like sound good, but you have to dig into them to find like the true meaning. Mm-hmm. It was brought up by this woman named Barbara Ehart. And she is, I don't know how long, but like it was a relatively new House member at this time. And she brought this up and is to keep trans girls out of sports. And this is interesting, a quote by somebody of the ACLU of Idaho. When this bill was introduced, he says many Idahoans were deeply uncomfortable with the legislation. Uh-huh. And what I read out of this, it's like it really came out of nowhere. Like there wasn't a lot of like public sentiment around it. And Idaho's largest employers, which included Chobani, HP, and Cliff Bar, all came out against the bill. Doctors, counselors, school board associations, students, student athletes of Ohio were all calling the governor's office, and it still got pushed through. So it's like, okay, well, where did this come from if this was very publicly opposed? And this is like where it gets really dark and sinister, is Barbara Ehart had teamed up with Alliance Defending Freedom, that they refer to as ADF. They basically wrote HB 500, and it's the blueprint for others across the country. Here are a few people who have been associated with ADF. Mike Johnson, our current Speaker of the House, who was a previous ADF attorney. Amy Coney Barrett, Mike Pence, William Barr, Jeff Sessions, and Josh Hawley, who I have heard the things he says against trans students, and it is so ugly. And his wife, Erin Hawley, is a current ADF senior counsel. So this is the size of this corporation. They have a annual budget of $104 million. In 2022, their financial claims were revenue of $104 million, expenses of $81 million, and they received $20 million in endowments. The Southern Poverty Law Center has deemed ADF as a hate group and has likened them to neo-Nazis or the Ku Klux Klan. They sue governments claiming religious liberty as a reason to discriminate. There is a trans woman, Lindsay Hecox. She went to Boise State, was on the cross-country team, and came out as the sole plaintiff against HB 500 and was represented by the ACLU of Idaho. ADF agrees to foot the defense bill for the state. When it goes to court, the judge rules a preliminary injunction and essentially calls it a solution in search of a problem, and one that's probably unconstitutional. And this, a solution in search of a problem, I feel like is so much of what the right does. I feel like it's a lot of like this TikTok ban right now. Like, we're going to spur up a problem and then solve it because we don't have a plan for healthcare and we don't have a plan to help the economy. So we're going to make up these things. And this was so interesting. This injunction was by a Trump appointed judge. So like that gives me hope. Like there are some judges that Trump appointed that like are upholding the law in ways that like you and I would agree with. Mm-hmm. The ADF in the state of Idaho challenged in May 2021. It went to the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals. And this is where it gets really, really weird. In these cases, the state gets the chance to make their final rebuttal. The state waived their time and gave it to ADF, which was very highly unprecedented and essentially says the state of Ohio deferred to a private organization in order to make their claims.
So what's the goal? I mean, they want to ban, or
yeah, okay.
Make trans illegal? Like, where's this going?
Okay, I'm glad you asked. So in this research, this Barbara Ehart and multiple other people that are bringing up these bills, they all cite this one circumstance in Connecticut. And like that is like the horse they're all riding on. And it was two trans girls in Connecticut who ran track and field. And ADF sued the state of Connecticut for letting them share a track with cis girls. Catherine West of Legal Voice is also litigating ADF's anti-trans legislation and says this is a debate about women's body autonomy. The case is pitting trans girls versus cis girls when really it's just an attack on all women. And the other layer of this comes down to race. These two girls in Connecticut were two Black trans girls. And anti-Blackness is key on how we got here. And Black women athletes are much more likely to be subjected to so-called sex verification testing than women. Think of women like Serena Williams, who people claim they misgender her all the time and claim she's a man. So really, like, the root of this is a racism and misogyny.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. One thought is a transgender justice at the ACLU, who's been involved in every case the organization has brought against ADF's anti-trans sports bills. ADF is arguing for a constitutional right to not have to share space with trans people. And if they succeed on that in these courts, if the Supreme Court one day holds that cis people have a constitutional right not to be proximate to trans people, then that can't be undone except by another Supreme Court case or a constitutional amendment. A final conversation with Barbara Ehart, narrator, says, not only is she not considering the humanity of trans people, but she believes we deserve to be punished. Our very existence is the actual crime that she's legislating against.
Yeah, so it's, to me, what I'm hearing is this double standard that we bring up a lot. But it's like freedom, constitutional rights, those are American principles that are for white, privileged Americans. I would say
evangelical Americans.
Yeah. And so you could be Black and be in that group, but you got to have a lot of money. or you could be a person of color, you can be a minority, you could even be, you can be a female, but you've got to have money, privilege, be white. You've got to meet some certain criteria to be included in that group. So it's just like, America's the land of the free, but, or if, there is not everybody, just because you're born here, the citizenship, the birthright citizenship is on the chopping block. I mean, there's a lot of unconstitutional, anti-freedom sentiments, at the root of a lot of these things.
Freedom only for us.
Yeah.
Freedom for our things. Just in this, this ADF is, again, really it goes to the root of, like, we don't believe trans people exist. So this organization is very scary and very well funded, and goes to show, like, how these things grow like wildfire, and you think they're out of nowhere, and it's somebody sowing these seeds of destruction.
And fear was a definite word. Like, I was like, man, I was listening to you describe this organization, I was like, this is some scary shit.
Yeah.
But is it also fair to say that they've obviously got to be scared shitless? Because I'm reading headlines and seeing things on the social medias about people just leaving the church in droves, that churches are closing across the country like crazy. And maybe the evangelical right feels like they're losing their grip. And so they're the minority, and they have to, it's all, it just goes back to that word that you use a lot, of control. I mean, they've got to figure out ways that they can maintain power, control over their agenda.
Yeah, and I've seen it on our side as well, but, like, fear can be the greatest motivator, and when you spark fear is when people will act and give, and maybe churches are using that fear to fill their coffers. I don't know.
I think there's a connection there that we have made that's very legitimate. Let's just say that.
Yeah, it's so sad. Getting to the root of this, it really seems like, just the history of misogyny and racism. I mean, talk about just the history of our country in general. And it goes to the misgendering of Iman Khalif in the Olympics. If it's a very pretty, straight, white, cis woman, they tend to be put up on a pedestal, but especially women of color, especially women who don't fit the right traditional aspects of beauty, especially if it is somebody within the LGBT community, they are just vilified. I mean, just hatred and vitriol spewed at them, and calling them men or calling them manly. I mean, and I will say, like, me and Steph, we have participated in that. We participated in the misgendering of Brittany Griner when she was at Baylor. We participated in that hatred.
I think that's the secret sauce. I think admitting that we're all part of the problem. If my wife was here, I think she wants to come on at some point to out me.
Oh, hell yeah.
And when I'm, like, doing, like, MAGA jokes and stuff around the house. But yeah, I mean, I think that's really how we're going to back to some sort of normalcy in the country, where we're, in terms of division, is just admitting, like, what role we have all played in how we got where we are today. I just feel like we've been, talk about, like, moral high ground. Like, the United States has been, like, beating its chest like we're better than the entire world for, a really long time.
Yeah.
We can kick anybody's ass. Our freedom's better than your freedom, or our government's better than your government. I was thinking the other day, I was like, man, we should probably change the name of this podcast to, like, the Democracy Project or the Democracy Experiment, because I feel like that's where we're headed.
Yeah. Yeah. And this, this lie that we have been fed our whole lives of like America is the greatest country in the world and we're the only ones that have freedom. It's like, did you ever watch what was that Aaron Sorkin show, The Newsroom?
We reached for the stars, acted like men. We aspired to intelligence. We didn't belittle it. It didn't make us feel inferior. We didn't identify ourselves by who we voted for in the last election, and we didn't scare so easy. We were able to be all these things and do all these things because we were informed by great men, men who were revered. First step in solving any problem is recognizing there is one. America is not the greatest country in the world anymore. Enough?
So, and I think that goes to show, like, if we don't travel, if we don't meet people outside of our bubbles, you know, outside of our neighborhoods, our churches, our states, our countries, our cultures, our religions, like, we don't know what's on the other side. And maybe that's the argument of this isolationism, to keep us here and keep us controlled and keep us dumb.
I was thinking what ran.
I don't know how I tied this to isolationism, but I did.
Well, what ran through my mind was, while you were saying all that, was like, I was wondering, I was like, has Sloan ever been to like a Pride event, like in a city like San Diego or Los Angeles or New York or Miami?
No, and like I would love to go to the one in New York. The dates didn't line up for us this year, and should be something that we, you know, make a priority. I mean, that's just, I don't know if I've said this on here or not. Like, that's,
why do we need a Pride Day?
okay, hold on, let me go on this other thing. Steph and I caught the New York bug, and we went a lot. I think we went like 5 times in 18 months.
That is a lot.
You know, there's a direct flight. It's 2.5 hours. It's very easy to get to. It's like one of the cheapest direct flights, like in the easiest places that you can get to from Birmingham. And it's like any kind of city, like you learn your places and you're in the hotels and the layout. And then it's like, well, we want to get away. And yes, I love planning a trip, but sometimes like you don't want to like have to study a brand new map every single time. And, but it's also like, I talked about this in our safe, and like talk about safe spaces last week. It's like, it's going into this safe space and you can let all your muscles relax and you can exhale and you can breathe and you don't have to have this wall up. And
because you feel like you're with like-minded people.
Yes, we're not judged. We're not being looked at. We can hold each other's hands on the street. We can stop and kiss on the street. We can like, you know, kind of like cuddle in a restaurant, like straight people do, like things we can't do here.
I think the simplest way you can maybe not describe God or whatever, but just validate it, legitimize it, is that God is love. Like, that's, if you want to explain it, it's just love.
Yeah.
Seeing you and Steph hold hands at a dinner or walking down the street in New York, or kiss, or, you know, whatever, just showing each other affection in a public place. That's love. So God must be there. But he's not, or they don't want him to be. I don't know.
Right.
It's crazy. All right. Well, are we ready for another break?
Yes, let's do it.
Whew, that was heavy. So let me pound this January 6th rock a little bit, and then we'll conclude.
Okay.
I think this has been a really great episode. I hope it gives people something to think about. And that's the other thing I'm grateful for, is it just gives me stuff to think about. I mean, I think it would be a great thing. I've got Diana, I have friends in San Diego that would probably love to have us over to visit for Pride Week or whatever.
God, that would be so much fun.
And experience that. And then I could come back here and go, look, I'm not gay.
It didn't rub off on me.
Yeah, it didn't turn me gay. I'm not going to cut my penis off.
Well, we should all do that.
Okay, so here's the headline.
I would also like to say Jason has asked if we can all go to a drag show together.
Yeah.
which I would love to. I'm just, usually in bed before 11 o'clock.
Listen, one of the greatest.
We should do a drag brunch.
Listen, I'm not afraid to admit that two of my all-time favorite movies, Birdcage and Brokeback Mountain.
I've never seen either.
Are you what?
Are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah. Okay, you're gonna have to put that.
Okay,
on.
I have some homework.
You're gonna the Birdcage with Robin Williams.
Yeah, I know of both of them.
I cried during Brokeback Mountain, and I've seen it like 10 times. I thought it was like the greatest love story ever told.
Do you want to know a movie that, as an adult, I cried the hardest that I've ever cried, probably since I saw Titanic as a young child?
What was it?
Dances with Wolves.
Yeah.
Dances with Wolves is the one. Talk about like life imitating art. It was the one that hit me in the face that made me go, oh my God, humans repeat history.
Non-stop. We don't learn from it. It's our greatest teacher and our most ignored.
It ripped me apart.
That is such a good movie. All right, here's a headline for you. Trump may come to regret his January 6 pardons. This is from Politico. So I've got some stuff I want to read you here. So
please.
Especially since you kind of disconnected on this one.
Yes, thank you.
So about 600 people who have been charged with assaulting or resisting law enforcement officers, including more than 170 who were charged with using a deadly or dangerous weapon or seriously injuring an officer. Those people were pardoned this past week. And here's something to kind of keep in mind that the right is so good at. They're the party of law and order. They're the back the blue party. And this happens not only on their watch. This is their, this is their mandate. This is part of the referendum. This is part of their mission.
Which goes to show it's never about back the blue. It's about anti-BLM.
And rewriting history. Yep. And that's what Trump's trying to do. He's trying to just rewrite history, and this is a terrible stain on the history of this country that he's trying to, sweep under the rug, just like they're doing with slavery and all the other things. LGBTQ. Trump's blanket pardon is unpopular, and it could help to frame early perceptions of his return to the White House. After the election, multiple polls reported that somewhere around 2/3 of Americans opposed Trump's promise to pardon January 6 defendants, including about 2/3 of independents. And this goes back to a problem, that you were mentioning with that group. Was it ADF? Like, I just don't. When are politicians going to start really exercising the will of their constituents, like the majorities? Like, I've seen so many stats about how, like, the majority of Republicans wanted abortion to remain legal, did not want Roe to be overturned, but yet it was.
Yeah.
So it's these small little marginal, like, things are getting pushed through against the will of the people.
Which is like these special interest groups and these lobbies and these super PACs are so insidious.
Yeah. Trump's mass pardon has also created a political problem for many of his fellow Republicans. And this is going to speak to them having to address, in these news interviews, what their feelings are. But the biggest thing this past week, or really from the Sunday political shows, is that, J.D. Vance said, if you're a nonviolent participant of January 6th, you're getting out of jail. But if you committed a crime, you need to stay there. Wow. And so Trump just, pulled the legs out in front of his VP and has left a lot of Republicans scrambling to figure out how they're going to answer these questions.
Well, how many nonviolent protesters of color were arrested during the civil rights movement, but also Black Lives Matter?
I mean, if that would have been 1,500 or 1,600 black trans people storming the Capitol, they were probably shot in a firing, like in front of a firing squad.
Yeah. But also, like, how did these members of Congress who were cowering in these halls, where Tommy Tuberville's on the phone with the president, like, bitch, no one knew who you were. Like, you think you were going to get out scot-free? Some washed up football player from Alabama. If a mob caught you, you were not going to get, they weren't going to know who you were.
Right.
You were going to get riled up right in the middle of it. I can't fathom, like, living through that and being like, yeah, sure, why not? Go right ahead. Like, what? These people on January 6th do not know all members of Congress. Like, let's be for real.
Yeah. And everybody was scared shitless, scared for their lives.
They probably don't know all of theirs.
So many people came out. Like, that's what frustrated me. Marco Rubio, passionately spoke out against January 6th. I mean, so many of them did. Lindsey Graham condemned it. I mean, and really a lot of people condemned Trump over this.
Well, they thought he was gone, and now he's back, and they are.
Yeah. Now he's back, and at least for the next, I mean, once he loses his ability to primary, and maybe he never will if Elon Musk keeps threatening to throw his money at that to keep control over members of Congress. It's really, really sad. But here's Senate Majority Leader John Thune, a Republican from South Dakota, sidestepped questions about the pardon, saying, "We're looking at the future, not the past." And that has been a very consistent talking point with Republicans. It's like, why are we going back to that? But it's like anything, whether it's conflict within a relationship, if it's not addressed, it festers. So we never really addressed it. I think both sides could, I don't know, have some sort of reconciliation over this and go, that's where we kind of were.
Yeah.
Until Trump started to come back. I mean, everybody thought he was done, and there's no way he's going to do this. But look at this. So even that Judge Cannon is even saying that the details, she's not going to allow Jack Smith's report and all the evidence to be, disclosed to members of Congress, which would ultimately probably lead to being, disclosed to the American people, like Jack Smith's case on January 6th. So that report's coming out, but she blocked the classified documents report from coming out. And it's just, if there's nothing to hide, why are we trying to hide stuff?
Right.
Why does Trump care? Why does Trump fight so hard to stifle these things if there's nothing there?
Right. Methinks you doth protest too much.
Yeah, I'm going to give you Senator or Secretary of State or designate Marco Rubio's response on Meet the Press. Craig Melvin was asking him to speak on the pardons. He said, "I'm not going to engage in domestic political debates. I can't in the role of State Department. My job is to focus on the president's foreign policy." And I just think it's really sad. I hope history is a motherfucker on these people, like in terms of their legacies. But I mean, I'm wondering, like, how do you go home to your wife and kids, or your wife and kids indoctrinated to where, like, they're like, oh, this is bullshit. You did the right thing. I would just have a problem. We were watching an episode of Chicago Fire last night.
Word, yes.
And I'm forgetting, I sparingly watch these shows. Diana's a big Chicago Med, Fire, the whole thing, PD. But Cruz was admitting, they were like, listen, this supposed wrongdoing you did, like, we were going to sweep it under the rug, but you're still wanting to come out and admit that you had some fault in it. Why? And his response, like, knocked me out of my shoes. He's like, I want to be the person at least want to try to be the person my son thinks I am. Maybe I should end on that. Any thoughts before we close?
Yeah, on that note, I was last Thursday after the funeral, I was driving to the farm and I was on the phone with my cousin, Melissa. She, we both have blended families, and then she married into mine. So there's understanding of step parents, but also like who Larry was to me, and both like working, on ourselves through therapy. So it seemed like the the perfect person to call. And she started talking about Christmas and how we didn't go.
Oh, interesting.
And she was like, I'm not doing that bullshit anymore. I don't want my kids to get to the age to realize, well, Steph and Sloan aren't here, so that must be okay.
That had to feel awesome.
Yeah, it did. It did. Because, like, for a lot of times, I just, like, never really felt understood or, like, felt like people, you know, was like, okay, well, it's, like, no big deal for, like, Sloan to, like, come here and, like, do this thing and, like, pretend. And that kind of hurt, but it's like, well, like, I don't really want to have to explain it. And then, like, they don't understand, you know, so there felt like there was this disconnect and that, yeah, I didn't feel like really seen. And that made me feel very seen.
I can tell you this. I've heard our kids comment on it many, many times. Mm-hmm. It's been very repetitious about it. And I think, you know, people were shocked to learn that Diana and I had separated because we're so publicly affectionate.
Okay.
Like our kids comment on it all the time. They're like, when we go over to, you know, Sally's parents' house, they hardly act like they like each other.
Right.
And y'all can't keep your hands off each other.
That's cute. That's sweet.
So I think that that's important for young people to see people in relationships, to see people in committed relationships that really, like, that's what love is to hold hands, to kiss, to hug. You know, I just wanted to make that point. I also wanted to just close out by thanking people for, like, even on both sides, for the participation on Instagram, TikTok. We got a comment on YouTube this week.
A wonderful comment.
Yeah, from somebody in India. So
I think Indiana.
I hope that makes it in.
Oh my God.
But I just really love, I don't know if anybody's checking this Gmail, but it's raisedredlivingblue.podcast@gmail.com. Email us and let us know, like, some subject matter you want us to cover, or where we're going right, where we're going wrong.
Well, I'm excited. Next week we have our first guest.
Oh, yes.
A buddy of mine coming into town, and I'm excited to get, you know, just a third party in here and his kind of, like, personal path, like, in politics. And he was a transplant to Alabama and moved out. So, like, gosh, what was that culture shock like?
Oh, I can't wait for that.
And finding community and all that. So I'm so excited. But y'all, thank you so much. Raised Red Living Blue. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube.
TikTok still exists.
And Instagram.
Yeah.
But thank y'all.
All right. See y'all in a week.
Have a great week. See y'all later.